Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this first session with NEDCC. My name is Sarah Parks with the Missouri Association for Museums. I'm their program manager. And I would like to introduce you to Tara Pewitt. Tara is speaking with us today and is a preservation specialist for NEDCC. She provides consultations, training programs, and assessments to cultural heritage organizations with a focus on the Western United States. Tara previously served as collections manager at Lane County Historic Museum in Eugene, Oregon, and holds an MA in preventive conservation from Northumbria University. Tara is going to take over most of the presentation today, but if you all have any questions or comments, please feel free to type them in the chat. I believe we'll try to have some time at the end where if you feel comfortable enough to show your video or unmute yourself, you can ask questions that way as well. But during the presentation, we'll do it through that chat so we can monitor that a little bit easier. Right now, I will go ahead and send that over to Tara for her presentation. And I believe she has a video for us to watch here to learn a little bit more about NEDCC as a whole.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. Just give me a moment. And I will play a short 90-second video just to let you know a little bit about NEDCC. Oh, sorry, I clicked on something and that is a bad thing. Let me do that again. Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Tara Pewitt, as Sarah said, and I am from NEDCC, and I'm presenting for you the first of a series of 6 webinars for the Missouri Association for Museum and Archives pre-conference series. So today I am presenting to you Celebrate with Collections, utilizing collections in your community's anniversary celebrations. I'm speaking to you today from my Oregon-based office where I live and work as a remote preservation specialist, and my focus is on the Western United States, although I do help clients around the country. So in order to not distract you, I'm going to go ahead and stop my video and we'll get into the meat of the material. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat at any time, and we'll either get to them during the presentation or at the end. All right, so here's an overview of what we'll be covering today. Just to let you know, what we won't be covering is this is not an event planning webinar, nor are we focusing on PR leading up to celebrations. Although those are certainly important topics, you can find other great resources on them. For example, the National Association of Commissions for Women put together a resource toolkit that deals with those topics. And a lot of these resources that we're going to be talking about during the presentation, there'll be a resource recap at the end, and so you'll be able to access them on the PDF of the slides that will be made available to you. So today we're really focusing on how your collection comes into play during anniversary celebrations. And like I said, our overview, we're going to go through an introduction and upcoming anniversaries, some common risks and benefits, some tools for planning and policies, and we're going to look at a case study that NEDCC worked in with the Alabama Bicentennial, and then offer you some funding opportunities and some resources in a checklist. Anniversaries can be moments of celebration and allow us to reflect on people, works, and events that have had an impact on society and culture. For cultural heritage institutions, they often lead to increased interest and deeper engagement with our collections. Now, local anniversaries can happen all the time, and sometimes you'll find nationwide events that a local institution can tap into. We were talking about this women's suffrage resource a moment ago, and that was prepared in support of the centennial anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment back in 2020. That's one where many individual states and counties prepared events and exhibitions that tied into a larger national moment. Here in the US, we're also entering a period of major anniversaries. In 2026, we celebrate the 250th anniversary of American independence. Preparation is happening on a national level through the US Semi-Quincentennial Commission, and several states have already passed planning initiatives as well. Now, NEDCC is right outside of Boston, and being located in New England, we know of many towns such as Plymouth, Massachusetts, that have relatively recently celebrated the 400th year anniversary of their founding. These can all be really powerful moments, and we want to ensure that we're celebrating them in ways that engage our audience members while also protecting our collections. But there are also a lot of risks associated with these celebrations. The increase in research and media requests, events, exhibitions, and overall handling of collections during and in advance of an anniversary places these materials at risk for damage, theft, and even permanent loss of content. So we're going to talk about a few of those risks in more depth. Many organizations will choose to celebrate an anniversary with an exhibition. This can be a wonderfully engaging way to tell a compelling story. The materials displayed have almost by definition a special value, but exhibition poses several preservation and conservation risks. For example, items must be handled to be prepared for exhibit, installed, deinstalled, and stored again, and this increased handling presents increased opportunities for damage and wear and tear. And this is why time must be spent well before the exhibit even goes up, weighing risks and evaluating the needs of the collection objects and identifying concerns and mitigating issues. So there must be a balance between preservation and access. So let's look at some of the risks associated with display. Light is one of the biggest risks to collection materials on view. We have an example, an excellent, if extreme example, of the sort of damage light can cause. And it's seen in the Mark Rothko murals at Harvard. They were on display from 1964 to 1979 in an area with constant exposure to sunlight. They were so damaged, as you can see in the photo on the left, that they were packed away for 35 years to protect them. And if you want to read more info about this, they'll be included in the links at the end of the presentation. There's a New York Times article on it, as well as the Harvard's exhibition page. Chemical damage is also, it's another risk, and materials are often framed prior to display. So acidic matting materials can interact with original materials to cause serious chemical damage. And you can see examples of this damage here on this image, the image on the screen right now. You can note that there's a speckled foxing under the area where there was the mat and the frame, and also the matte burn around the image from the acid. Research, handling, and exhibition all bring the next risk. So mechanical damage, while there are certain broad environmental causes of damage, we ourselves may also inadvertently cause problems through the use and handling of our collections. And like we said, results in mechanical damage. Examples of this are, you can see here, pinning of original photographs, excessive weight or width in bindings and boxes, broken book spines from improper support, pressure from overpacked boxes, folded over corners of pages. That's really a killer for books. Rolled and folded items, which leads to warping and tears. So exhibition can be a form of providing access, but access can also be achieved through other means, which is why I'm separating it out here. Access is often very mission-based and something that both administrators and granting agencies get excited about. However, it's important to remember that preservation and access are inseparable. If it hasn't been preserved to last, you can't use it. Essentially, preservation is a set of ongoing activities that extend the life expectancy of collections, which in turn ensures the long-term access of these materials. It's common to experience an increase in access requests leading up to an anniversary, and this can take on a variety of different forms, including researchers or members of the press requesting to view materials in person or asking for digital images of collection materials. Exhibitions themselves are also very access-oriented, and all of these things can lead to an increase in viewing and handling of the collections. So while access is being provided and during preparation, which of course means that there are risks involved. In general, an item that is in high demand and needs constant access may be a higher preservation priority than an item that no one is trying to access. So leading up to an anniversary, you really want to think about what materials, curators, and patrons will be the most interested in, and then spend your time and resources ensuring that these collections can be safely accessed, whether that means implementing more preventive preservation activities, staff training, or seeking conservation and stabilization of key objects and artifacts. And finally, while not as frequent as the display, chemical, and mechanical risks that we discussed, theft and vandalism are also risks associated with access. The image you see on the left is from the very famous theft at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, where 13 high-value works were stolen in 1990 and still have not been recovered. Security is always a risk for items on view. And if you're curious about this, the Gardner Museum has a narrative on their website. Vandalism is another related security risk. Here you see a punched Monet at the National Gallery of Ireland. The point is that access and display, while important, are inherently risky for collections. Making the decision to exhibit or allow increased access or handling of materials requires a weighing of these risks and steps to mitigate potential issues. Policies around display, handling, and access are the underpinning of good practice. Of course, it's not all doom and gloom, and there are many benefits to utilizing your collections during an anniversary celebration. The benefits of celebrations may seem quite obvious to us, but they include advocacy among stakeholders, community building, grant and fundraising opportunities to fund conservation and preservation, greater, greater visibility for collections, and it contributes to a more inclusive historical narrative. Anniversaries can be a wonderful opportunity for collaborating with neighboring institutions. You may find that collaborating reduces the workload and it provides an opportunity to link the stories you're telling to other institutions, different collections and different perspectives and such. There are a lot of great resources regarding collaborations between cultural institutions and their audiences. A couple that I've encountered that are pretty good are Nina Simon's works, the Participatory Museum, and the Art of Relevance. And those are great places to start. They are available to read online and apply to more than just museums, and I believe they are free. We have some links again at the end of the presentation and in the additional resources. And we'll also be exploring a case study that capitalizes on many of these benefits later on. Anniversaries provide an opportunity to assess and care for your collections. This may include conservation treatment for your works that you wish to display, items you anticipate increased research interest in, or materials that support your celebration in other ways. The excitement generated by the anniversary can make it an opportune moment to raise funds for these conservation needs, from individual donors, granting organizations, or even creative community-based funding. It is, however, important to note that unless you are a trained conservator, the only cleaning or repair that you should be doing is gentle surface cleaning. It's the really basic dusting with a soft brush or a dry cleaning sponge. NEDCC actually has a preservation leaflet on this topic, and we updated that recently. We also offer a webinar on surface cleaning that is interesting. I took it and it was great. You never want to apply any liquids or chemicals to your photographs. Leave that to a trained conservator. And if you have a damaged or dirty item, you can contact a conservator and they'll inspect the piece and write you a proposal for a treatment. If you're thinking about working with a conservator and have questions about this process, you can also check out the NEDCC leaflet on that topic, which is linked on the slide. And also, please feel free to reach out to us by email. We're happy to talk. So how do we create these events so that we reap the benefits with fewer of the risks? For starters, planning needs to start far in advance. In many cases, you should be thinking years, like not months or weeks in advance. This planning shouldn't focus exclusively on event planning, although obviously that is important too. It should also focus on developing the supporting policies and procedures that will allow you to host a successful anniversary. Your institution's policies will support a successful celebration. If you don't have some of the basic supporting policies we're going to discuss, then think about putting them in place. Work on developing them, receiving administrative approval, and implementing them before your anniversary arrives. If you do have the following policies, review and update them as needed. Developing these provides another opportunity to collaborate with neighboring institutions. You may find that developing these policies together reduces the workload, and you can also find sample policies and templates online to help you get started. of the first things we want you to develop or review is your institution's mission statement. A mission statement is an umbrella statement that's meant to lay out the overall goals and objectives for your institution. Excluding or ignoring the mission of the parent institution can lead to confusion and conflicting directions. So you want to make sure that a smaller unit mission really fits in with and serves the overall mission. If the mission is for a collecting institution or unit, it references preservation. The American Alliance of Museums provides further information on the guiding principles and a sample mission statement. You see the link on the screen. Your collections development policy should indicate the scope and depths of the collections. This is crucial leading up to an anniversary. You may experience a dramatic increase in offered donations leading up to the anniversary, and you will need to have a policy in place that outlines what you will and will not collect. This is important for successful stewardship of collections. A good collections development policy enables repositories to make wiser use of limited resources by bringing collecting in line with resources available for preservation, storage, and use. And this is a quote from Gerald Ham, who was a mover and shaker in the Society of American Archivists, also known as SAA. For guidance on your own collection development policy, look outside to other collecting institutions in your region. Try to avoid extensive overlap in collections, and you may want to avoid competing. For example, ideally, a local library and historical society will have complementing collection scopes rather than being in competition with each other. Having intellectual control over your collections is critical. If you don't know what you have and where it is, you can't care for it, and you can't provide access to it, even if it's incredibly relevant to your anniversary. You also won't know if something's gone missing. We touched on the risk of theft and loss, and intellectual control is important for mitigating this risk. If you know that this is a weak spot for your institution, consider an inventory of your collections, either the full collections or the sections most relevant to your upcoming anniversary. And if you've never conducted an inventory before, the National Park Service's Handbook on Museums has a chapter describing the process. Good intellectual control starts at the time of accession. Since you may experience an increase in donations leading right up to your anniversary, make sure that you have a solid deed of gift now. The deed of gift transfers ownership of and legal rights to the donated materials and requires certain specific elements. The Society of American Archivists, A Guide to Deed of Gifts, is a useful resource for creating your own, and you can see the link at the bottom of this slide. As exhibitions are often a major part of anniversary celebrations, we're going to look at supporting exhibit policies a bit more in depth. Here on the screen, you can see some specific areas that you may want to address in one or several policy documents. And this is up to you and may be determined by the size and mission of your organization. It should also be noted that many of these policy areas overlap with those related to collections management and emergency preparedness. So you may be able to cull information from existing documentation as you work toward a comprehensive exhibition policy, should you have it, of course. If not, this is a good time for me to plug the importance of written policies when it comes to holistic or total collections care. So some questions you may want to ask when creating or reviewing an exhibit policy include, how long do exhibits stay up? Or how long does this particular exhibit stay up? It may be helpful to establish maximum guidelines and acknowledge that some items may require reassessment or more limited display. Who selects the materials being exhibited? Hopefully, it's someone intimately aware of the collection items and their needs, for example, the curator. If conservation treatment is needed before or after an exhibit, who's responsible for the treatment? Financially, especially. What is an acceptable environment for exhibiting loaned materials? Do you have an acceptable environment for exhibition, both for your collections and for any borrowed items? What type of security is available to protect them? Are there specifications for label design and for case layout? And what is your policy on loaning materials to other institutions? Policy is especially important when borrowing or lending, since it sets expectations on both ends. Should have a written loan policy and loan procedures. And it should include things like conservation, who pays for it before and after. Is there insurance for exhibit and transport? And is there a loan fee? You do need a loan agreement form. You need to get exhibit information, the curator, the necessity of the item, the length of the exhibit. And it's good to get a facilities and security report from each institution your piece will be traveling to. So this photo from Litchfield shows an example of why details are important. The exhibit format is problematic due to light exposure, as well as security risks. While you'll likely be focusing on items within your own collection, you may borrow objects from neighboring institutions to strengthen your anniversary exhibitions. In that case, be ready to supply the following to the institution that owns the item in question. So borrowing institutions should supply your institution and contact name, your title, location, and dates for the exhibit. You want to have details of the items to be borrowed, including their call number or appropriate collection metadata. You want to have specifics of the items to be on exhibit. So for example, for bound items, you want to know what page or where it's going to be opened if it's a book, what's going to be shown. You would like a full facilities report and detailed about the exhibit space and environmental standards, insurance coverage for items on loan, and any information about catalogs, web versions of the exhibit, or associated publicity. Of course, there may be other considerations that are specific to the institutions and organizations that you might be dealing with, which are not listed here. So it really is up to your institution and the institution that you are working with. On the flip side, if you anticipate requests to borrow your materials or have a request to borrow an item, you should be able to provide the requester with the cost of the loan, any condition reports for the item, any conservation work prior to the loan, specific environmental standards to maintain in an exhibit space, security requirements, the need of book cradle supports, mounts, or any specifications to create display housing, and logistics for item travel to and from your exhibit space. Remember, you know your collection best and what is safe for them. And hopefully you have your exhibition policies in place already to help you justify decisions to loan or not to loan. And if loaning, think about the value of the items to your institution. What would loss or damage mean? There is a useful example available online from NARA, the National Archives, and that should be linked as well at the end of the slide, at the end of the presentation. Condition reporting should be a routine part of collections care, but especially important in support of exhibitions or other periods of increased handling. As part of your loan decision, and during the entirety of the exhibition process, make condition reporting a routine to ensure that the object is safe. You want to inspect all parts of items before display and note existing problems with its physical appearance. Examination should continue during exhibit, and this helps to catch issues early. And after the exhibit, ask the questions, does the object need conservation? Can it be exhibited again? And is there a better method for display? Be sure that you document all of this information. Written documentation is good. And if you add photo documentation, that is even better. And now we'll go over some general guidelines for how to handle your collections, both for research and scanning. These are rules that you should share with staff, volunteers, and researchers so that they're sensitive to possible risks. The good news is that with a little organization and thought, we can do a lot to prevent or minimize mechanical damage through good storage and handling practices. Now let's start with the big one. We're all familiar with the white cotton gloves that used to be very common in libraries and museums, but these are not really used anymore. Cotton gloves are not as subtle and clean as we need them to be. Instead, we recommend that you use nitrile or latex gloves. You can just throw them out when you're done, or you can use them a little bit, but at least they are easier to keep clean. You don't really need to wear gloves with historic documents or books. Just having clean, dry hands is perfectly fine. Emphasis on clean and dry. But for photographs and certain objects, such as metals, you have to protect your collections from any oils, salt, and dirt that are on your hands. Plus, the gloves can also be a level of protection for you in case there's something on the materials that could be harmful. And of course, make sure that you're always using appropriate, stable supplies with your collection. Label in pencil, not in pen, or use an archivally safe marker. You can buy blue photo pencils that are great for labeling prints. Again, always look for that symbol of the PAT. That's the photographic activity test. You want to make sure it passes that before you use anything in association with photographs. For supporting your bound volumes, use book cushions like the one pictured here. They're foam wedges made out of preservation quality foam. They are a affordable and easy way to support the spine and covers of the books when you have them open. Now, if you're in a pinch, you can take a clean cotton towel and just roll it up and stick one underneath each cover to support it while you're looking at the item. You could also construct some sort of cradle from archival board if that is something that is available to you. Before we get to handling our collections, we need to be prepared. So you start with yourself. As I said, you want to have clean, dry hands. You don't want to use any creams or hand sanitizers. Just wash your hands and dry them thoroughly. You don't want to wear nail polish, as that can mark your book. And you want to tuck in any baggy shirts or ties or pull back your hair. Some people basically, when they say they're going to handle archival materials, they pretend they're going to operate heavy machinery. So all that safety, that good stuff. Once you're prepared, you want to get your workspace set up. It doesn't matter if you're going to just handle the book or object briefly, you still need to have a large flat space available that's clean and empty. Now, some of our items may be very large and heavy. So before you pick anything up, know if you need a partner to help lift it and know where you're going to put it down. You want to have a plan before you do anything with that. Always visually inspect an object before handling it. Look for weak points and remove any lids or loose elements. And you want to clear the path between your storage and your workspace. Open any doors or move anything that's going to be in your way, because the last thing you need while carrying a heavy object is to trip over a cord or a chair. It might be helpful to have some basic policies or guidelines for handling. So if you have someone come in and look at a ledger or some old deeds, you can share some safe handling tips with them. Use a tray or a cart to transport oversized, heavy, or awkward items from storage to your work area, reading room, or exhibition prep space. You always want to handle materials slowly and with care. With books, use your whole hand to carry the page, and as you turn it, support the page as well as the binding. This also gives you a chance to feel what's on the page, how heavy it is, so you're prepared if something big is going to drag down the pages. Especially in scrapbooks, you want to make sure that you know what's on either side of the page. If you feel like the page is unusually heavy, peek under the page before fully turning it to make sure you are supporting in the right area. Now with books, really take a look at the condition of the binding. How much do you need to open it to see the pages? Do you need to use multiple book wedges to get to the angle that you need? Book sofas and wedges like these come in a variety of styles and shapes. We mentioned that earlier. And you can order any type you like as long as they're made of preservation quality materials. And they do range in price. You can find some cheaper ones and you can also find some expensive ones. So it depends on what budget you have in mind. Similarly, remember that you want to avoid crushing book spines or any three-dimensional aspects of an object when you are scanning. Flatbed scanners really are specialty tools best reserved for certain types of flat, stable media. If you're focusing on photographic prints and flat documents, then a flatbed scanner can be a great option for meeting those image requests from researchers and the media surrounding your anniversary. They're fairly affordable, generally less than $300, and can even be used for slide scanning with the addition of accessories like slide holders. Now, other materials can be imaged with a camera setup. Imaging projects for weak, damaged, or oversized materials are best accomplished by enlisting the help of an outside vendor. This may be something you need to budget for your plan as you plan your anniversary. In terms of the camera setup that we were talking about earlier, there are affordable cameras out there too, so that is something that is worth exploring. Now we're going to look at a case study on the Alabama Bicentennial. From early 2018 through the start of 2019, NEDCC worked on conserving the state of Alabama's 6 constitutions, along with their ordinance of secession. The work was undertaken as part of the state's bicentennial celebration, and it was literally years in the making. We talked about the importance of community involvement and advocacy from stakeholders. Well, this project had support not only from the Alabama Department of Archives and History, but also from Alabama's legislature, who established a special bicentennial committee in preparation for the celebration. There was also an incredible amount of preparation from the Alabama Department of Archives and History, which prepared educational resources for the public and several exhibitions leading up to the opening of their touring exhibition, We the People, Alabama's Defining Documents. Julie Martin, our marketing and public relations manager at the time, put together a great story on the conservation work supporting this project. And you can read those details on our website, nedcc.org, if you are interested. For this webinar, I want to highlight some of the key pieces of the story as they demonstrate how important planning and preparation are for these events and how successful they can be with the right support in place. So the 4 constitutions measured between 20 and 43 feet long. They were unrolled, examined, and worked on in sections. Things such as seam failure and degradation of the ribbons holding the 1875 Constitution together all needed treatment. On the image of the left, you actually see flaking of the iron gall ink on the Alabama's Ordinance of Secession. So iron gall is notoriously unstable, and flaking like this can eventually lead to a loss of text. After thoroughly examining the documents, our conservators consulted with the archive staff to develop a treatment plan that would stabilize the constitutions and allow for their exhibition during the bicentennial, as well as supporting their long-term preservation. A variety of treatments were applied. On the right is an image of a conservator applying a dilute solution of conservation-grade gelatin to areas of flaking ink. This acts as a binder and allows the conservator to consolidate the damaged text. Again, this is just one small aspect of treatment, and I would encourage you to read the full story for a sense of just how much work is done. Ultimately, a very successful exhibition and celebration, We the People, opened at the Huntsville Museum of Art and then traveled to the Museum of Alabama at the Department of Archives and History. The work at NEDCC also provided the archives with digitized versions of the documents, which are available to view online, and expanded the reach of the exhibition. There were some great community tie-ins as well, including a participatory project called People of Alabama. In addition to the story on our site, you can learn more about the bicentennial celebration on the Alabama 200 Facebook page. In total, the bicentennial celebration allowed the Alabama Department of Archives and History to conserve and exhibit some of its most precious documents, engage citizens from all 67 counties, as well as those visiting the state. It promoted meaningful conversation about the history and future of Alabama and generated a ton of positive press coverage. A job well done. And so now we are actually nearing the end of our session, and I want to go through some of the resources that we have compiled for you to help you out. Here on this page are some suggestions for resource that may come in handy when looking for funding sources. Federal agencies such as the National Endowment for the Humanities and the National Endowment for the Arts have yearly grant cycles. It's also worth it to check what your state, or even more locally, your county or town has in terms of funding opportunities. And as you see at the bottom, some resources that NEDC offers to help with the process. We do work with a lot of institutions that have grants, and grants are great ways to get your projects funded. And there are all kinds of grants of different levels and different amounts depending on your needs. So the next few slides have links to various additional resources, including the links to those mentioned earlier in the webinar. At the top of this, you'll see a link to NEDCC's preservation leaflet series. And our leaflets include information on exhibition, handling, working with conservators, low cost, and no cost preservation tips, among many others. You also see on this page the toolkit that we mentioned earlier, the Women's Suffrage Centennial Resource Toolkit, as well as the AAM Mission and Planning Standards, and a couple of other resources for community building and collaborative practices, including the 2 books that we mentioned by Nina Simon over at the bottom. If you're interested in learning more about the Rothko murals or the Gardner theft, so we have the links to those articles listed here, as well as the various planning resources that we went over. So the first part is the exhibition stories, and in the bottom of the slide, you have the collection tools, including the NARA's borrowing guidelines and the National Park Services Handbook chapter. On this page, these are some of the Alabama bicentennial and semi-quincentennial resources, such as a link to the American Battlefield Trust, the administrative arm of the U.S. 250th celebration, and the AASLH page with updates and information that they're consolidating from the field. So if you guys have projects in mind, these are good things to look at for support and for guidance. And finally, given the time we're currently in, I wanted to provide some resources that focus on digital engagement. Some of these are from large organizations, but they can be used as inspiration for what's possible. So some of you are familiar probably with the Google Arts and Culture, a partnership with over 2,000 museums in 80 plus countries. It increases access to artworks and are great examples of how to link curatorial content with strong images and create immersive digital experiences. The Guggenheim from Home includes tours, podcasts, and collection spotlights. This is another well-resourced institution, but you can do many of these things without spending a lot of money. Historic New England's curriculum includes primary resources and downloadable activities for students. And the Family Ties curriculum is broken into modules. It's 5 modules. And Digital Commonwealth includes historical collections from libraries, archives, and museums across Massachusetts. It's a great consortial model, and you may have something similar in your state, especially relevant for your region-wide celebrations, where your collections and resources may be stronger when paired with those of neighboring institutions. Research shows that digital access ultimately encourages more people to visit in person too. So digital efforts are great for navigating a pandemic during the pandemic, but will also support an institutions once the doors are open, which is where we find ourselves now. Hopefully, everybody is open or in the process of reopening. You can think of these efforts as long-term engagement initiatives. Other tools include the GlamWiki initiative, which helps cultural institutions share their resources with the world through collaborative projects with experienced Wikipedia editors. So GLAM stands for Galleries, Libraries, Archives, and Museums with Wikipedia, and it also includes botanical gardens and zoos. Omeka is a free open source content management system for online digital collections, although you can pay for them to provide a hosting service too. It has an engaged community that you can turn to for support. And a Content DM, it's proprietary, not free, but it's well supported and easy to use. There are so many other useful tools, including social media out there. Explore, ask your peers, and figure out what works for your institution. And finally, before we end, these last few slides contain a summary of some of the questions raised today in the form of a planning checklist. Feel free to print, use, and expand upon these. On this slide, you see points from mission statement and collections policy. So we're talking about some of the drafts and your administrative approval, as well as staffing and budget considerations. This next slide is about intellectual control. So creating your guides, working on your processing and cataloging and standardization of your documents. The slide is on exhibition. So NEDC actually has a couple of preservation leaflets covering these considerations. You might want to look at the leaflet 2.4, protection from light damage, or leaflet 2.5, protecting paper and book collections during an exhibition. And these are accessed on our website. I have a question from Amy. Yes, you should have a copy to these slides, so you don't have to worry about writing all of this down. I've provided a PDF of the slides so that you can have all of this information on hand. And finally, this last slide is points on access and handling, about training, about creating instructions, and also, again, your policies, guidelines for your collection. And that is the end of the checklists. And with that, we are at the end of the session. We do have a little more time. So I would be happy to answer your questions in the time that we have remaining. I'm going to go ahead and restart my video so you can see me. We have contact information at the bottom of the slide if you want to email and ask more questions there, or if you ever need to call us, it's right there at the bottom. Like I said to Amy, these slides will be available to you in PDF form so that you can access all of that information there. I realized that there was a lot of stuff, especially at the end. And thank you for joining me and listening, participating today. So yeah, I open the floor to questions. Hello, Sarah.
Hi, Tara. Yes, as you said, I will attach the PDF of all the slides with the post-participant survey and the recording of the sessions all after this. So you guys will have all of those resources here in
Perfect.
hopefully by the end of the day, but within a few days for sure.
That sounds good. And we're always available to contact you if you need us, if you want to ask any questions or follow up or need more suggestions. And oh, I guess I can stop screen sharing at this point. And I turn it over to anybody who would like to ask anything. I think I answered the one question that I saw on the chat so far. Hopefully this means that everybody is good. It was clear and nothing too confusing or onerous. I know it's a lot of work, but it's useful work.
It was. Thank you, Tara. I know a lot of us here in Missouri just had experiences with that with our bicentennial that just happened. So does anybody have any comments on how their institutions managed that, or things that they would do better, or things you know now from Tara's presentation that you may have changed from our bicentennial work either?
Yes, please do share your stories. That's how we learn best. And I think we said we're a small enough group that if you are more comfortable, instead of typing in the chat, if you just want to turn on your camera or turn on your mic and speak, that should be fine too. Seems like people are quiet.
You covered everything so well, Tara. We have no
Hopefully.
questions.
I hope that's the case. And as I said before, this is like the first of 6, I believe.
Yes.
So we'll throw a lot more information at you and you'll have a lot more opportunities to ask questions. So maybe for the next section, you can come prepared with things that you want to explore.
Yeah. Well, like Tara said, this is one of 6. So our next session with NEDCC will be September 13th, same time, 1 to 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, for 10 tips for providing safe access to collections. So if you have not registered so far, go do that. It's going to be a good time. And like I said, I will send the recording of this, the PDF of the slide deck, and then a couple other resources and a follow-up email to everybody.
And again, thank you for joining me. And I see you're welcome for all. I'm happy to share all this information. I see a thank you in the chat though. And yeah, everything should be. I'm not sure what else to add because I don't want to overwhelm you with more information since I already threw so much at you. You're welcome,
We definitely appreciate it.
We love sharing. That's why we exist. We like to help people.
Well, hopefully you get lots more calls or emails to NEDCC now about any.
We are happy to help.
All right. Well, I guess I will stop recording then. Feel free for anybody, if you have last minute questions, to stay on, but we'll go ahead and stop the recording for